Hi, welcome back to Dreamseed VR. I'm your host Sarah Finn, and it's been a long time, hasn't it? It's really good to be back making a new episode, and I figured why not celebrate? Why not get really weird and dress up? Last time we left off, we did an amazing panel with Fong, as well as Mark Lee and ELO projects. That was amazing. We have some other panels that I'm currently scheduling with some other incredible digital artists in the visionary art genre. So I couldn't help but want to jump back in and make this happen regardless of any cat-related technical difficulties. There was some really exciting stuff that happened this past weekend in the AI field, and I felt like it might be time to finally do a little bit of AI commentary. I've been asked by many people over the past year and a half, 2 years almost, to address my opinions regarding AI, and I didn't feel like it was time. I don't know why. I mean, my opinions have stayed fairly stable, fairly much. Anyway, they've remained pretty stable. Even though things have evolved quickly and become bizarre, even from the inception of it. I think that it's without sounding totally stereotypical, it's a really nuanced field, and it really just depends on the individual applications of it regarding ethics and stuff like that. But for the sake of just narrowing our focus on what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about AI and the arts, and we're going to do a little bit of commentary on some recent conversations that Andrea Jones, visionary artist and digital wizard, had with Sam Altman this past week in November at PlayAlchemist, as well as an earlier conversation, their round one conversation on this topic that occurred at Burning Man camp of the same name, PlayAlchemist, in 2022. So I was really interested in these conversations in light of Sam being let go from OpenAI temporarily over the weekend. I'm not so interested in covering the play-by-play or the drama or the speculation. If you're interested in that, obviously you followed it yourself, and or it's really easy to find other stuff from different news outlets regarding that. But I just took some notes on the conversations and kind of have my opinion and commentary on that I thought might be interesting to share. The notes kind of look like this. So at the beginning of the conversation, Sam expressed that he thinks that OpenAI has figured out intelligence. What the definition of said intelligence looks like is open to debate. He had mentioned that if you had asked about a projection of AI 10 years ago, what the impact would be on society, people might have guessed that it would be something like labor first and then intellectual and then creative. But now that we actually see it unfolding in real time, we can see that the opposite is happening. We're seeing it affect the creative fields first, and then moving into the intellectual, and then moving into labor probably last, because of hardware, as opposed to it can operate in terms of software on the internet. There's a lot of fear around the shift in economy and people's ability to have their livelihoods remain intact during the disruption that AI is causing, especially in the creative fields. So, and it was mentioned that, Sam is essentially leading us into a future like an explorer, but it's not a place he can lead us back from. And that he's not an elected person. Fundamentally, this technology changes human history. And there was even a moment where Android made a cheeky joke that if it was an AI Terminator scenario, that he would totally go back in time and choke Sam out. But I feel like it's in good jest. I mean, it really just speaks to the gravity of the situation. Especially, when artists have essentially invested their entire lives into being able to make art. It's our identity. It's oftentimes our spiritual practice. It's the way we leave our legacy in the world. The skills and the time and the labor that people have invested in being able to do something like that be so easily overcome by the speed and proficiency which those same kinds of products can kind of be soullessly made with AI. And it also came down to like, how do you define creative intelligence? When Sam says like, oh, I think that we've nailed intelligence, it's like, well, is it actually creating novelty? Like, what is the ethics behind the ways that the data sets are trained? And that's something they cover quite a bit in the second conversation. So it was never really a question of whether or not it would happen or not. It's only ever been a question of how it happens. So Sam's postulation that it doesn't matter if it's OpenAI or someone else isn't factoring in that the cultural ethics of how forerunners implement a technology absolutely sets the tone and the example by which the rest of the industry develops a standard. And I feel like, in a way, that initial conversation probably sparked that understanding in him, because later on in his talk with Cambridge, after he accepted the Hawking Fellowship, like, he really starts to speak to that a little bit better. But he does it in the abstract. He doesn't really do it in the practical, other than talking about things like maybe limiting computational power for private individuals and stuff, just in terms of keeping the power of the intelligence limited, so they won't be able to, I don't know, use it for nefarious purposes and stuff. But it's not even like computational power that allows a person to do a thing. And it's not even like forbidden prompts or forbidden words or this or that. Like, an intelligent enough person is going to be able to find a way to speak around that, to circumvent that, to jailbreak something. And there's going to be so many other competitive AI as well, that like there are going to be homegrown AI. There, it really comes down to like, we need a regulatory body. And that's something he spoke to in the Cambridge talk. But like, we can't have a regulatory body come after these technologies get so powerful that they're capable of doing that damage once they get out of the reins of the people who developed them. Like, we need a regulatory body now. We need cultural guardrails and like ethics that are decided upon by culture as a whole, rather than just like people in their glass tower thinking they know what's best. Because you see that in the bias of ChatGPT. You see that in the different kind of bias from something like Grok, where Elon's like, oh, Grok is based. And it's like, okay, well, that's a different kind of bias. It's important to recognize that. It's like, there's this cute meme I'll put here, like, oh, why is the AI wrong? And it's like, well, because you programmed me. There was a funny quote where like Sam said, how does the world decide what we want? Says the unelected guy. And I have, respect for the position that he's in, and like the power that he has. It's like, you respect power. It's just, but I have yet to be impressed by some of the things that he says. I feel like he has a very groomed PR approach to his tonality and the way he talks about things, and then also the lack of a lot of detail or clarity in describing what the kinds of safeguards and ethics and direction they're pointing this in. It seems like, he's just intrepidly developing this technology for the sake of it being created, but he's not really thinking about like, where's the direction. So, and at one point they said machines don't quite have creative intelligence, it's still an illusion. Generation in and of itself isn't creative, it's still a parlor trick. So instead of answering what creative intelligence is, he stated that the AI doesn't know how to do it yet, rather, and that until it can or does, he and OpenAI doesn't know what it is. So maybe because he isn't an artist and doesn't have personal creativity in that same way that like a traditional artist would. So, it's important to point out that Andrew is not a Luddite. He's been involved in using technology in the aid of art for decades. And, he doesn't debate the value of AI. But it does have problems to solve. And of all the problems that humanity faces, like, that AI could solve, what problem does the image generation solve? Like, like, oh, why doesn't OpenAI solve cancer? And it's like, oh, well, we would like it to. And it's like, so I highly suggest you actually go and listen to these talks. This is me sort of like addressing different points, point by point, even though I'm doing it sloppily. I'm sorry. But it's important because in that part of the conversation, in talking about like, oh, why doesn't it solve something that's a big deal like cancer? In pursuit, he mentioned, Sam mentioned that in pursuit of the true general use of intelligence, that the first thing that worked was language models, and that they had to do this kind of workflow where they would like add random noise and then learn to take it out, and that kind of refined its understanding of said language models. But then when they were working on that, they decided that image recognition was going to be one of the ways that they trained it to have a refinement of that noise cancellation. Andrew pointed out something that I really liked, that the positives are that this is the greatest evolutionary pressure that creative artists will ever face in any of our lifetimes, and that, but at the same time, he's like, oh, was the bar not high enough already as an artist? The struggles to get there. And I really resonated with that because, I've definitely been a struggling artist for most of my adult life. And having been a lifelong artist, it was obvious to me, even as a child, like that was what I wanted to pursue. And it becomes this funny relationship because in the pursuit of the incentive, which is, wanting to make more art, have more time to do art, you make the decision like, okay, well, in order to do that, I need to be a professional artist because you have to make money in life. And so I could either make money just to make money, or I could make art to make money. And so like my art could sustain me while I pursue more art, right? And so, while the creative industries are a huge part of the economy, from commercial ad generation to media to product design and stuff like that, or concept art in the gaming industry, all of those things make money, but the people who pursue those things, they're not doing it just for money, but they need money to live. And so when you introduce something that doesn't have that kind of same incentive beyond money, it doesn't have the incentive to pursue art for its own sake, as like a spiritual practice, or just like a creative love of the art, it gets messy really quick. There was a point when Sam said basically that they were releasing their products this way so they could get people to pay attention, because if we don't get the world to have a global conversation about it, that it'll be bad. I thought that was a really weak statement. That felt like he was saying like, oh, we opened Pandora's box to talk about it because if we don't, it's going to be bad. And it's like, okay, so you're saying you're going to open it in any way, but you're not going to do it in a way that's ethical. You're not going to do it in a way that asks permission of the people whose data it's trained on. Like we can't even define whether or not data being trained on open source images on the internet is theft or not. It's like, is it theft when I look at something and am inspired by it? Why does that change when a machine does it? And is it because the machine can iterate things it's trained on so much faster than a person, whereas like a person has spent like however many years in art school, however many years refining their style and their education and the things that they're influenced by. Like these are all words and dynamics and definitions that really do need to be sort of like sussed out by the community and the world at large for us to be able to better understand how we value the different things, and then also appropriately benefit the parties involved in the training. And I mean, then it like touched on universal basic income and stuff like that. I personally think that there would be a really big problem in society if all of a sudden nobody had incentive to work, because there will always be things that human beings need to do, and it's just messy. I don't really want to get into the political side of it, but I think that UBI is kind of pie in the sky, and that Sam just like hangs his hat on that because it's easy and he thinks that that would solve the problem. I don't think that would solve the problem at all. Andrew said, like, when I ask you where it's going, I wish you had a powerful, positive answer that I could believe in. I agree. We need Sam and OpenAI to tell us where they're pointing the thing. You can't just make the thing for the sake of making the thing and expect it not to be wild, expect it not to be chaotic. Like they're making an incredibly powerful thing, but like allowing way too much elbow room for chaos to just manifest in it. So it's insanely dangerous to not have an ethical framework or goal set out besides just make it think. You know, and I'm sorry, but like these implicit biases in it politically like aren't practical enough guardrails. It's just not. Andrew had a quote that was really terrifying. He said, "We are at the end credits of organic art history as we know it." I thought that was really important. And I'm a positive challenge. There was a point when Sam was like, "Oh, I empathize." It's like, do you? Do you, bro? Empathy is sympathy with identification. Where is the identifying with the art community that you have totally turned on its head, upside down? There's no sympathy with identification there, because if there was, they would be handling this differently. Yeah, there's no upside to losing art as we know it. There's just not. There's no upside to that. And I think about the way that the lace industry was impacted when they started making lace mechanically, and how like they called it the Great Lace War of the 18 whatever, so you can look it up. But it's very similar. It's very similar to like the upset that happened with photography, and a lot of people just had to like shift what they do. But I think really just we need to find where we identify. Oh, pardon me, identify the value and stuff, because you know this isn't like automating truck driving. Like they said during the talk, like, yeah, truck driving is not a calling the same way that art is. Art is a spiritual thing. At least it is for me and many other people that I know. Hey, kitty, stop that shit. You know better. Hey. Yeah, I know. So yeah, special skills have value, and if AI takes that value and opportunity from people, we gotta figure it out. So there was a weird moment when Sam was like, "Oh, you know, we could use AI to cure cancer. Do we preserve the enjoyment of artists to keep value and then make art, or do we wait 30 years for the cure to cancer?" And I was like, "Bro, you are telling me that you are in charge of developing and implementing and launching artificial fucking intelligence, and you didn't catch that logical fallacy? That is a fucking freshman year college logical fucking fallacy. Pardon my F-bombs. I don't care. That's dumb. You can create economic and ethical frameworks for AI integration that don't violate art jobs and still allow medical fields to fucking cure cancer, dude." So, and Andrew addressed that. That was a dumbass fucking reply. So anyway, let's jump into part 2, round 2. It's been a year. Everybody's had really wild years. Dramatic events have taken place. There was a tragic fire that happened in Andrew's life that destroyed his physical body of work for the most part. In that time, he has been developing a really amazing artificially intelligent model that they call Chimera. It's got like 3,000 different prompts, if I recall correctly, and it's a way for the community to explore the beautiful aesthetic and framework of style that he's established throughout his career. And they've been using it to like do these amazing projects where they have the community make 10,000 crazy Spangle masks, and then they animated them for the recent Spangle show. It's super cool. It's a way to create this like feedback connection to the community and like co-create something together. I thought that was really amazing. So in that time, it was like the past year has been very much like a time of reflection on how ChatGPT sort of shook the ground and was a big moment, and people going from thinking about AI as like a creature to thinking of it more as a tool. And so there was, you know, in that time, there's a lot of dialogue around it, a lot of polarization amongst artists, a lot of friction between the camps. And it seems like the rift has just sort of been widening. There's a lot of really heated emotions about it. I've had people express that to me personally. There's a lot less work out there. One of the problems related to this is that like during the pandemic, there was a lot of online jobs that are sort of like downsizing as people go back to in real life society offline. And then there's also the writers strike. There's also the Screen Actors Guild strike. And so that coupled with around 6,500 job losses in the gaming industry just the past couple months. Like, we're definitely seeing a shift going on economically. That does have a lot to do with the implications that AI has for the workflows that people have, whether it's coding and all kinds of stuff. So there's like 16 million Midjourney accounts. Like I said, definitely go see these 2 talks. These are just highlights. It's way more in depth. I literally listened to like 3.5 hours of related talks this past weekend just to like hit these commentaries and highlights. Yeah, between Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, and DALL-E, there's something close to 15.5 billion AI images out in the wild right now. A lot of artists impacted, a lot of lawsuits, congressional hearing. Yeah, but there's also a lot of pushback. There's artists making tech to glaze, which is making their work digitally unscrapable by these big data sets that are being built. There's Nightshade, which is a way to poison data sets. Crazy. And it just comes back to the dignity of their data, and that their art represents that most special aspect of their consciousness and their life and their labor. These are direct quotes from Andrew. Andrew, I fucking love you. You were so articulate. You really stuck up for all of us. Yeah, just to have their labor taken against their will and used to create a tech that outruns and outpaces and outcompetes their ability as people. So I really like some of the cool suggestions that were made. You know, like, what if there was an art school and like all the work from the students was the thing that an AI was trained on, right? I think that would be amazing, because in that way you could actually teach the AI to learn. Because right now it's just imitating, right? It's not actually creatively intelligent. The same way a person is when they look at a subject and they figure out how to do, you know, contrast and form and shade and rendering and this and that. It's still a parlor trick for AI. But if you could train the AI to watch the evolution of an artist learning their craft, like, there's a lot more room for it to actually become intelligent in an ethical way. So I thought that was cool. Yeah, I want to make mention of a really amazing thinker that Andrew mentioned in the talk, Jaron Lanier. Really great guy. He's sort of like the granddaddy of VR, and he also has a lot of really great critiques about social media in general, but he really championed this idea of data dignity with himself and a guy named Glenn Wheel. I think it really just comes down to us all finding a way to agree not to generate an image in the style of an artist unless they say it's okay. That's something that I've personally made a point in my own exploration of AI and prompt craft. The only problem with that is that, like, if the existing data sets on Midjourney already scraped that data, then it doesn't matter if I don't mention a style. It's still going to have been trained somewhat on that stuff. Like Andrew was mentioning, that he can see the influence of Craig Mullins in the data sets, as well as many other concept art styles in general, which I agree with. I can definitely see that. And that's why I think that Chimera is such an important exploration. I do think it's important to point out that it's not easy to train these models. It's like, Stable Diffusion is difficult. It's not really at the point technologically yet where it's easy to just tell other artists to find a way to train, you know, these things on their own work. I've done it a little bit in a super sad, hacky, rudimentary way by showing Midjourney my work, asking it to describe it, but in particular just blending my own images. So I'll show it an original piece, I'll show it another original piece, and I'll say blend these. But honestly, because the data set is so limited, it looks really chunky. It looks bad. It's super embarrassing, and it doesn't see the delicacy in my line work. It doesn't see the nuance. It doesn't see the dimensionality, and it just like takes a fucking dump on what it thinks my style is. And that's really disheartening. It takes entire teams of really talented programmers and engineers to be able to train AI to pull off something that's as beautiful as Chimera. And even in the time that I've been playing with it over the past 2 months, it's become a lot more sophisticated from the first, you know, when beta was first released and we were tinkering with it, to now, just like 2 months later, even if that. So I think it's really important not to have unrealistic expectations of the little guy, because in an ethically framed application, AI definitely gives a special leverage to small independent artists that wouldn't necessarily have the kind of power to pull off certain things. Whether it's like, for example, I'm writing a script right now. It's just like this stupid idea I've had for a while. I don't have time to sit there and struggle against my writer's block, but what I can do is tell it to write me a basic scene. Tell it what I want the dialogue to be. Like, it's a conversation between these two people. It's kind of about this, you know, like this is the setting, this is the names, and it'll give me a crappy framework. It's not one-to-one. It's not something I would just like throw in a script and have people do, but it gives me something to work from. It's literally just a frame. Like, I'll go in there and I edit it, I add stuff, I take stuff out, I shape it. It's just like a lump of clay, right? It's not a finished piece at all. And I think that if we understand that humans have this unique ability, because we're human, to know what's going to land with us, right? As of right now, I mean, we're pre-BCI, so as soon as like computer brain interfaces are able to just read our minds and be like, oh, well, this is particularly exciting to the neural net, like they liked this, like we're going to do more of that. But human beings have the premium on knowing what lands with human consciousness. And that's something I actually talked a lot about with Michael Garfield in his Future Fossils podcast from like 2018. It's called Raising Robots Right. And we talked a lot about AI back then, way before this stuff even dropped. So go check that out. But the premium that humans have on knowing what's going to land with us, I think that keeping that in mind is what makes these tools important, because we are the curator, you know, like the AI is not the artist, but like the humans are the art director. And for my work, quite literally as an art director, an independent one at that, having a tool that helps me chop through tons of iterations and cut out all the bullshit noise and like really hone in exactly what I'm looking for, whether it's with a client that doesn't know how to describe what they want, I'm not stuck in the mire constantly churning out variations and doing revisions and being like, is this what you were thinking? Is this what you were thinking? Should I tweak it like this? Should I modify it like that? That totally kills the spark and motivation. Is not fun. Anybody who's done independent contract work in the arts knows that that sucks. It's so hard to get paid for your time when you're stuck doing that. People have a deep sense of entitlement that you are just like, you must be psychic if you're an artist and you must know what they're imagining. And that's not the case. So like ethically leveraging these technologies for small independent artists can be an amazing boon for their ability to compete with large corporations. And I think it's super important to keep that in mind. And that's something that Andrew touched on as well, talking about like, you know, it's a great way to go through a lot of different kinds of ideation. It's a great way to sort of like refine potential compositions and references and stuff like that. But it's still McDonald's art. It still doesn't have the soul that a human hand can bring into it. So keeping that in mind is going to be like one of those interesting nuanced moments. I kind of stand between the camps. I'm not like AI tech bro, and like I do have a traditional arts background, but I am somebody who's moved into the digital arts because I see how powerful it is. Like I struggled so much as a local underground visionary artist, as a painter in the Bay Area in particular, because it was super gatekeepy. Like my stuff was good, you know, I got invited to shows, I was painting at the big boy shows, but you know what, like, I'm gonna be real with y'all, I was quite literally pushed into basements and dark corners by men in the visionary art community, by dudes who would be late to their own gigs and see me in a nice well-lit spot with good traffic, and they would be like, you're a small fry, get out of my way. And they would push me into basements where there was no foot traffic. They would push me into dark corners where it was really difficult with my limited lighting that I brought to have, you know, a good workflow with my live painting. These are some of the real challenges that come from that, as Andrew called it, like the bar. Is the bar not high enough already? It's like, it's a high bar. It's such a high bar that I've struggled for the majority of my adult life to be able to bring my stuff to the audience that I know would support and appreciate me. And that's why I feel like AI has been very useful for me to like leverage what little power I have. So I definitely see the nuance in the conversation from both sides. Sorry, I got emotional thinking about getting pushed in dark corners. That was real, y'all. I'm not gonna name names. I'm above that. But it happened. If it happened to me, it happened to other people. And, you know, I was like, nice. And I was like a pushover. I was like, you know, go along to get along kind of chick back then. I was not as feisty as I am now, but like, I don't even like thinking about how many other sweet-natured people got pushed around like that. So thanks for listening to that part. I think it's an important thing to mention because I mean, ultimately, like the struggles that we're having with AI, I don't think they're necessarily intrinsic to AI. I think it's like our application, and the application, like I said at the beginning, is going to be different for every sector, every problem that we want to solve. Whether it's like, oh, let's cure cancer, or it's like, oh, let's generate 15.5 billion images. I think blockchain could be a really useful way to track data sets, to track the influence of specific artists as like trained on it, and like to find ways to monetize it for them, even if it's just like fractions, like super teeny tiny fractions of cents, like that adds up, and that could be amazing. But as of right now, there's just so much chaos in the system that was introduced by the reckless release of these things last year without any kind of consent models created. And so, the power is extremely asymmetrical right now, which is unfortunate. Yeah, it's going to be an uphill battle to create trust with the audience, for models that use images that weren't consented for. That's something that Andrew pointed out. Regarding my own work on a book that I actually just completed with my dear bestie and mentor, David J. Brown. It's called The Illustrated Guide to the DMT Entities. And it comes out next year from Inner Traditions. A lot of the art that was generated for it by myself with AI, there were never any style prompts included. There was never any artist's names mentioned in the prompts. And one of the things is that, like, for me, contextually, it's a conversation with the collective consciousness. All of that art is collaborative with me, but it's not like obviously from me as a sole creative individual. I feel like it's a collaborative effort with the collective consciousness to sort of shine a light on these different archetypes that people see in the DMT experience. So that context was extremely important to the work as like an artist statement or thesis about how and why it was made the way it was. There would be no way that holding a day job and just like running the rat race that I would ever be able to make 30 different crazy beautiful high def images in a year's time on the publishing schedule to create a book like this. It just wouldn't be possible. David and I dreamed of this book for 10 years, since 2013, and that has always been the hurdle. And as soon as I saw a piece of technology that could help me circumvent that, I've wanted to work within as ethical a understanding of the technology as possible. So if I could have done it with more ethical data sets, absolutely, I would have done that. But am I gonna not bring that work into the world knowing that it could benefit a lot of psychonauts? Like, no, I'm gonna do that. But I'm also gonna explain myself because I think it's important. So I am full aware of the challenges around it, but I also want people to understand that it's not about ego, it's not a moneymaker, it's a collective consciousness collaboration. So for everybody that was a part of those data sets, thank you, and I'm sorry, and I hope you forgive me, and I love you, and we're in this together, and we can figure it out. So that was that. There's a couple other notes that I wanted to share regarding his talk. Accepting the Stephen Hawking Fellowship at Cambridge. This was Sam Altman just a couple weeks ago. I found it really ironic that Stephen Hawking actually had a lot of criticisms about the dangers that AI could pose. So I thought that was kind of funny. And I mean, there were some things posited, like how are we going to know when it's conscious? And it's like, if we don't describe consciousness to the AI, and then sort of like ask it about its experience or whatever, is that going to be indicative of it, be like, oh, well, there's this thing called consciousness, and then you describe it to it, and it goes, oh yeah, I never heard that word, but I know what that is. That is the thought experiment that Sam's colleague came up with, but that's as strong as they've got right now for a thought experiment. We're not in trouble, guys. Anyway. So still speaking on the second talk that Andrew and Sam had, I thought it was really interesting that Andrew's way of understanding a problem or situation or a challenge or whatever was to sort of like offer himself up as a guinea pig to the AI and like learn about it and create a model himself. I really commend that approach. I think that that was very intrepid and brave of him. So congrats on Chimera. It's super cool. Let's look at my screen caps from comments I left on the Cambridge talk. And there was a moment when like he acted like it was like all bricks or all gas. You know, it's like, oh, people are like trying to stop AI. I'm like, nobody's saying stop it outright who's in any kind of respectable position to comment about it. They're literally just saying pause until there's proper regulatory bodies. And there were a couple moments when he mentioned the Atomic Energy Board as an international regulatory board regarding, you know, a very powerful and potentially dangerous technology, which I thought was funny. I'm like, yeah, we're talking about something that's just as powerful in a different way. So those are kind of my thoughts about those two conversations. I highly recommend you listen to them yourself. My apologies about my very like squirrely delivery. I'm literally doing this like after work with crazy kitties trying to throw some chaos into the mix. I think that, you know, the conversation's obviously not over. It's going to be ongoing. This was just me sort of like cracking open the door, and there's like a deluge behind the door. This was just my way of like digesting a tiny bit of it. There will be other things to talk about regarding the debate between AI and the creative fields, but in the meantime, check out Future Fossils. Gonna have a podcast with them and David J. Brown later this month. I don't know when it's going to be released, but keep an eye out for it. Follow Future Fossils. Michael Garfield's brilliant. And check out the conversation I had with him a couple years ago. I'll put a link in the description. It's called Raising Robots Right. We talk about AI back in 2018. So it's a little dated, but on a philosophical front, I feel like a lot of the points that we hit then are just as relevant now. And yeah, I think that's about it for now. Again, I just want to say thank you for tuning in. Thanks for your patience. I'm hoping to keep on producing these on a little bit more of a regular schedule. But yeah, look for the panel that we're going to do sometime in December featuring some amazing artists. I've been in talks with Glass Crane, as well as a couple other people. And yeah, I'll talk to you next time.